Members, we're all ready. Welcome members to this meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee. Else got there? That's me. Welcome to the officers, external audit and anyone listening via the online webcast. Please can I remind members that after speaking to turn your microphone off for the benefit of those watching the online webcast. Item number 1, apologies. Do we have any apologies, David?
No apologies this evening, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, the minutes, just to confirm the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee held on 24th of June 2025. I'm happy to propose the approval of the minutes from the Chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Payne. All those in agreement?
Carried, Chair. One. To abstain. Carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? Councillor Hemsley.
I would just like to say I have cleared this with the monitoring officer, but I am a tenant of Rutland County Council. So while the rent isn't decided in the matter, I just in that.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Thank you. 4, petitions, deputations and questions. Have we had any deputations or questions come in, David?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions with notice from members?
None for this meeting, Chair.
Thank you. Notice of motion, to consider any notices of motion. Have any notices of motion come through, David?
None received.
Thank you very much. So on to item 7, approval of the statement of accounts for 2024/25 and the annual auditor's report. To receive report number 86/2025 from the Strategic Director for Resources, including the agenda supplement, which was published earlier today for members. Kirsty or Andrew to present. I think Andrew's going to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, as the Chair said, this report is to present the 24/25 Statement of Accounts for approval with delegation of the signed final copy of the accounts to the Chair of the Committee. Included with the report are 3 appendices. One is the audit finding report. I'll hand over to Helen at that point to talk from Grant Thornton to talk through the details of her findings report. The 24/25 Statement of Accounts as at today's date, based on the publication today, and then the management representation letter, which is a formal written statement just assuring management assuring the management responsibilities and assertions around the financial statements. So to get to this point, there's been a huge amount of work from both the Council's finance team and the auditors as well. We've worked really well together in terms of getting the audit to this point. We've had over 284 queries raised from the auditors, which we've responded to promptly to get us to this point. And the Rutland will be one of the first local authorities to be in this position, fingers crossed soon, when we actually sign our accounts. I've summarised the audit findings report at the point of writing, and there was 4 main issues that were identified. There was around the leases register and the completeness around that. We've already put in place quarterly meetings before the recommendation of property to ensure that is up to date, and we're working on ensuring controls in place to make sure that is as up to date as it can be. Around related parties of members, so again the checks were that there wasn't any related party transactions with them, but the registers were not up to date. So again, the finance team have undertaken, we will review Companies House for directorships and compare that to the register of interest just to ensure that they're all up to date. And the last one was around journals. The next one was around starters and in the process. There wasn't any issues with it, but there wasn't the correct documentation at the point. So all staff were paid appropriately and in line with their contracts, but there wasn't any documentation to it. So again, the HR team are going to be reviewing their processes and ensuring that that recommendation is picked up. And the last one is journals, which is a recurring recommendation from the auditor. But due to our size, if I had to authorise every single journal the council done, that would be pretty much my job. So it's difficult to do at this size, and we feel we've got compensating controls in place that mitigate that risk for the council. So again, although it's a risk being raised, there hasn't been any issues with any of our journals found. It's just our size is difficult to implement that. As Chair said at the start of the meeting, we have submitted a supplementary document alongside the accounts today. So the majority, this is the change. It's around a change in our account, which is around a £2.5 million payment to Mel. The validity of the payment is not being questioned. It's the timing of the payment that is crucial here. So the council believe and still believe that it should be accounted for in 25-26. However, both the council and the auditors are in agreement that it is a very marginal call in terms of what you use to determine when that payment should be accounted. The council have done it on the legal substance of that transaction. So in effect, we didn't have an obligation to pay Melton until they submitted a valid claim to the council. That claim came in on the 3rd of April 2025, so in the next financial year. So that's when we've accounted for it. We had a long discussion between the finance team and the Section 151 officer around this because we knew it was going to be an issue in terms of, because of how close it was to the year end. The auditor's opinion is that the substance of the transaction is that we are funding Melton for 24-25 payments that they've made, so therefore we should have accounted for 24-25. As we said, it is a very marginal call, and depending on where you sit would be which side of the fence do you want it to be on. However, we recognise as a council, as we've seen in previous years, keeping our accounts open for a longer period of time opens ourselves up to more risks, particularly in an environment where we're likely to see legislative changes coming forward that could impact our 24 accounts and make us make further changes to those accounts. So on the balance of risk, the council have made, finance team in consultation with the Section 151 officer, have made the opinion that we will adjust our 24-25 accounts to reflect this payment being made in 24-25. And we've done that in full disclosure of the committee, so you're fully aware of those changes. That's my intro to the point.
I'll just echo as well before, in case Helen wants to come in as well. But as Andrew's already stated, an incredible amount of work by both the audit team and the finance team as well. And this builds on the lessons learned from last year, but also the interim audit as well. So both teams have worked differently, and it's proven to be fruitful as well. So just to allude as well, again, I think I said this last year, but you know, the audit report that you've received as well is relatively clean. So it's a good audit. Helen's nodding. Thank you, Helen. Brilliant. So, you know, the high standards that have been previously set have continued. So all credit to the team. I think one thing that we haven't mentioned, but it was a risk identified in the audit plan. This year was significant in terms of implementing the changes with regards to the leases as well. And Grant Thornton had highlighted that in the audit plan, and you'll notice it's silent, as in, you know, a significant piece of work that was well conducted by the team that hasn't led to any impactful errors in terms of the accounts. We've got one in terms of administration and communications with the property team, but for the first year, that's amazing. And it'd be interesting to see how the sector has responded as a whole. Thank you.
So I think that's over to me. Thank you, everyone. So this is going to feel like we've rehearsed this, but I promise you we haven't. You have the audit findings report in front of you. It's the report that I present at the end of every audit. As you are all aware, I wear two hats as the auditor, so I have a duty around the financial statements, and to give an opinion on the financial statements is what you have in front of you today. Equally, I have a duty to report around value for money. And I'm just going to quickly deal with value for money first, because that's probably the easiest one out of the two to sort of deal with. The code requires us to report on value for money this year by the end of November. Work is, as you will notice in the report, work is largely complete. I think we had the last piece of information this morning. I'm due to review the draft report tomorrow. It's Wednesday tomorrow. So that report should come to you very quickly. I mention the value for money work because I cannot sign an opinion on the financial statements until both the work on the financial statements is done and also the work on the value for money is done, which is why we've worked really hard to try and bring the work on the value for money as far forward as we can to try and mean that we can sign off these accounts earlier. So that is due very shortly. At the moment, we have not identified any significant weaknesses in terms of value for money, and that is important because it means I don't have to reference those in the opinion that I give. In consultation with the chair and Kirsty, I'm proposing that when we have completed that work and we can circulate a draft of that report, providing it stays with no significant weaknesses, I'm proposing that it doesn't come to committee for discussion before I sign the accounts, because that will shortcut the process. If something changes, then we'd need to have a different discussion, but certainly to circulate it outside the meeting cycle for information, but then have any discussions we need in the, I think it's December, committee meeting. But that will enable me to sign an opinion as soon as the work is completed, which I think is the aim of all of us. But I thought it was worth us be just explaining how that process worked.
No, thank you. No, that's fine. I think from the value for money, I've got no problem with that. I think if there are any issues, I'd probably like to circulate it among the members of the committee, because I think we all need to have a look at that. There may be some comments coming back, and if that's okay, we'll go ahead and do that. No problem.
Thank you, Chair. So that's the value for money, but essentially that is looking very much like a good news story as well as it was last year. In terms of the main agenda of what you've got tonight, which is the financial statements, again, this is a good news story. As Kirsty said, it is a very clean audit findings report. Don't write that many of these anymore. And equally pleasing is the fact that I am sat here on the 30th of September and there are very, very few bits that we are left to complete. You will see on page 6 there's a few areas of outstanding work. Financial instruments is outstanding because we're just agreeing some final wording because we'd had some disclosure changes. Housing benefit testing, I think we're just awaiting for one piece of information around there. The pension fund assurance, as you are all aware, I can't sign until I've got the necessary assurance from the pension fund auditor. Pension fund auditor for Leicester County Pension Fund is Grant Thornton, and the director assures me that that is due very shortly. So again, we are anticipating that in the next week or so. We then, once we have that assurance, there are certain procedures we need to do, but we have resource in place to go through those as quickly as we are able to. And then, as you'd expect, we need to complete any subsequent events reviews and do those final checks on that last set of statements and look at the letter of representation, which is on the agenda tonight. So Andrew has already talked you through the adjustment that isn't mentioned in the audit findings report, and I just again echo those sentiments. It was a very, very finely balanced decision. For us as auditors, the one thing that we looked at was a standard which talks about events after the reporting date. And that asks you to consider anything that might have happened after that reporting date that gives you information in relation to the year in question. And I think for us, well, for me particularly, that was the bit that made me go, I think actually it needs to be in the other year. I completely echo Andrew and Kirsty's points that there was a lot that we needed to consider as part of those transactions, and it wasn't a change any of us made lightly, but it's a change that we needed to make. Importantly, it doesn't change the bottom line position, And this is the point where, as an auditor, I say we often make a lot of changes that are required by auditing standards, but for you and members of the public, actually, it doesn't make a difference to the amount of money and the bottom line. So a technical accounting adjustment rather than anything particularly fundamental, which I think, again, is really important to emphasise. If I just take you through broadly, you'll notice that there was an adjustment that was made that did impact the bottom line, but again, not material, and that relates to a change in a pension disclosure as a result of the actuary. Again, one of those technical accounting adjustments. Pensions always comes in historically a little bit later, so that change has been made. There are also some unadjusted misstatements on which are detailed on our page 35. Again, important to note that they are not material. Important to note that they are errors that in some cases are identified through testing. One of them is an extrapolated error, which you see very frequently in audit reports. Again, I'd like to emphasise that in any audit you are going to find things. It is very rare for us to not find anything at all. The fact that there are just a handful, again, is testament to the work that the finance team have done in terms of preparing the accounts and the quality of the working papers that we've had. Some changes to disclosures as well. The most notable of those, again, we've talked briefly around financial instruments and the presentation of grants received in advance and how that is presented. But again, that is a reclassification rather than anything fundamental. Andrew alluded to as well some recommendations that we've made. We've tried really hard to slightly reword the recommendation around journals. I completely accept the point of the size of the authority, but I wouldn't be doing my job as auditor if I didn't point out that it was unusual and it looked different to others. I accept the fact that you as the committee and you as the finance team accept that that's a risk and acknowledge you have the different arrangements in place, but I need to keep raising it. But again, the recommendations you will notice are all low priority, are things that we've recommended for best practice to help you get even better. So not flagging any red recommendations or no areas of concern. So taking all of that into account, hopefully we can finish those last few bits in the next couple of weeks. We have a way forward in terms of the value for money, and I'm anticipating issuing an unqualified audit opinion, which, as I think Andrew alluded to, would be one of the first in the country if things go to plan. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Helen. Questions from members? Councillor Payne?
Just a big well done. I'll just echo what's been said. It's great achievement, I think. I've just got one small question. The journal issue, it was there last year, it's here again this year, and I accept the mitigation around it and the fact we're small, but will it just keep coming back year after year, or can we close it somehow?
I am not going to keep making the recommendation, but I will have to mention that it's there and there are mitigations in place because it's part of our reporting.
Okay, it'd just be nice to stop talking about it really if it's not an issue.
Yeah,
Any other questions, members? Councillor Stephen. Oh, by the way, remiss of me. Welcome, Councillor Stevenson.
An absolute pleasure to be back on Audit and Risk.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Just one small question. It was around the property services one. Are we confident in having stable staffing arrangements? Because I know there's been a little bit of fluctuation, and I appreciate that could be a finger in the air answer for that. And will there be an impact should there be fluctuation in the staffing that we've historically experienced?
Absolutely. A bit of a finger in the air, and I feel like I'm tempting some fate here, but so thanks. But absolutely, I've got no reason to believe that we haven't got a stable team in place. There are, with the new head of service in place, started in February. He's very much owning that team and the work of the team, and I would argue this lease is part of that tightening up some of the administration of it. but as well with the leases work that was done for IFRS 16, that new accounting treatment, you know, the lease records are being looked at more detail as well. So I've got no reason to think that we wouldn't be able to sort this one out.
Any other questions, members? I have one. And I have to say, first of all, again, that I couldn't really, I was really looking through things with a sharp tooth comb. The accounts that are presented are brilliant. But I've got one this question, and it's just a risk because a lot of what we do, their margins are so tight throughout, our budgets are so tight throughout. And I wanted to ask the question because I picked out, and I assume it's done by a third party, an error in the floor areas of some of the businesses, buildings selected. I presume that's done by third-party testing, but that equated to £600,000. Do we know why or how, or has that been closed off, that loophole? Or can anybody come back to me on that as to what's happened?
Thanks, Chair. Happy to pick this one up. So it was down to, it was a third party, our valuers. What they had done, they hadn't gone out and done a physical walk around of the site and measurements. What they had done is taken a floor plan that was used previously, and it wasn't one that the councillor provided them with. So what happened was it was around whether it was gross internal area or net internal area, and they'd used their own conversion rate to do that. And what happened was when they used the wrong floor plan to then the conversion, the way that they applied it meant that measurements were incorrect and the valuation was incorrect and overstated. Again, working with property, we have put controls in place to ensure that floor plans are issued and signed off. So there is a control there in terms of the right floor plans are issued, and also we've instated the quarterly meeting. So as part of that, we will review the valuer's report when it comes back in the first time, and one of the checks that we have built in is that we will check floor areas back to internal records as well. So it was a third-party error, but we're now building in checks to make sure that even if it is a third-party error, it will get picked up before we get to the statement of accounts and the values are in the statement of accounts.
Thank you. That's fine. Thank you very much. Councillor Ross.
Just one comment. I think the value for money report is the single most important part of this document for the public. And I think it's disappointing that the way it is actually consolidated within the accounts, because it's an extremely lengthy document. I know you've gone through the pain to actually produce it. But for the public and for public understanding, the prominence given to the value for money report, I believe, is actually critical for this and all other councils in terms of public understanding of the effectiveness of working of an authority. And it's concise and it's understandable. I'm a chartered accountant as well. I don't understand these accounts. And it's critically important, I believe, that our public understand how the finances, that the council is run efficiently and effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Coming back, Helen.
Yeah, I just want to say, Councillor Ross, I completely concur. My suggestion to not show you that report in like a public forum before I sign the opinion is based on the fact that there are no fundamental issues. I don't want to stop it from being debated. It will still be a public report. It's right that it comes to the December committee. What I am keen to avoid is us holding up me signing the opinion on the accounts until that debate has happened. If I thought there was anything that really needed to be aired, I would hold off on signing that opinion. So I completely agree, and it is an important report and one for you to discuss.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I would concur with that. I think there's nothing there. I hear what Councillor Ross is saying, but yeah, there's nothing being flagged, and I think that all systems are go, and congratulations to all. Just one final thing from me was the formal conclusion of the sign off from of the audit. It's perhaps for my benefit, but we don't get a certificate pushed through till confirmation has been received from the National Audit Office. Is that something, what's going on there? If you can enlighten me on that one, I'd be grateful.
More than happy to. So, so again, it's to do with what's sat in the code. As you will be aware, all of the statements of accounts across the land get consolidated to form the government's accounts. In doing that, they ask for various returns from different bodies. For you, you fall below the threshold where we are required to do any specific audit work. However, they could decide while they are auditing the consolidation that they wanted to ask a particular question of something that may have happened at Rutland County Council. If I have certified the audit as closed, I can't answer that question. So they ask us and every auditor in the land to hold open the certificate until that work is finished. So we are not anticipating anything. It would be highly unusual for that to happen, but me and every other engagement lead needs to hold open the certificate to allow for that potential eventuality.
Thank you, I understand. Thank you very much. If there's no further questions, members, the recommendation is one, that we consider the draft audit findings report for 2024-25 on Appendix A, that we approve the 2024-25 statement of accounts as final and delegate the first signing of the statement of accounts in Appendix B to the Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee in line with Section 2.52 of this report. And 3, considers and approves the management representation letter. Please could I have a proposer and a seconder to approve the recommendations. Proposed Councillor Karen Payne and a seconder Councillor Raymond Payne. Everybody in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That's correct.
Thank you very much. So on to item 8, excuse me, the financial performance emerging year risk management. To receive the report number 88/2025 from the Strategic Director of Resources. Kirsty, would you like to present?
I would, but I was going to hand this one over to Andrew as well, and then we'll be a partnership as we answer any questions and further up. But I will just bring it in as a teaser. This is the first type of this report that we've brought to this committee, so we think it's moving us forward in terms of that good governance for the committee to consider the in-year risks that are being presented in our financial position. So without further ado, I'll hand over.
Thank you, Chair. As Kirsty said, this is the first report of its kind that we're presenting to the committee today, and it's presenting the financial risk that the council are carrying as at the end of Q1. The report focuses on some key areas, as you'd expect, so the revenue expenditure, capital expenditure, treasury management, fiscal indicators, and then what reserves we've got to help mitigate some of those risks that we're carrying as well. So in terms of the revenue risks, not unsurprisingly, the majority of the red risks that are highlighted in the report are around our social care and demand-led services, so children's social care, adult social care, transport. What that doesn't mean is we're not trying to mitigate these. We are still working on these as a council and actively working with directors to put mitigations in place where risks are arising. So we don't just accept the risks, we do constantly work on those risks with the directors. As you would expect, the council's high needs budget is also on there flagged as a risk. It is at the point we was expecting to be overspent by 3.7 million. So although the statutory override has been brought in place, it extends the council not needing to finance that risk. Obviously, what it doesn't go on to do is to say we don't bear the cost of financing that risk. As we spoke about this committee in the past, it is that credit card impact in terms of, you know, we are not funded for this position. So again, it is a real risk on the council's budget that we're seeing today. The other risk mentioned is around the fair funding review, and although the council has an assessment of what that might mean for us, obviously there is a risk until we get to budget and eventually the local government finance settlement that it could change and the government's priorities could change as part of that. So again, it's flagged as a risk for the longer term, the council. The main risk identified in the report around capital was around the profiling of our scheme. So when are these schemes actually going to be delivered? We have been working with the project officers for these. We are now getting into a better position in terms of profiling of the schemes and when they're actually going to undertake the works. So we've identified it as a risk at Q1, and again, we worked with the teams to really try and say when they're going to deliver projects. Treasury management, there isn't anything really to report here. They're all on target as at Q1, so I won't report anything there. And as per the report, we do have 2 reserves in place to assist with the management of these risks. They're not there to fund the risks, they're there to try and help and put in place mitigations to stop the risks occurring. So they can help, it's that short-term investment, not long-term financing of risks, is what the reserves are there to do. And that was my intro into the report, and if you want to add else, open to questions from me.
Yeah, members, Councillor Rapay.
Yes, my antenna is twitching. I mean, this is unsustainable in the long run. We all know it. This question of special needs, we'll talk about that for the moment. Sadly, I'm not hearing anything from government suggesting that there might be even the vaguest attempt to deal with this problem. It just, listening carefully, I think you can hear that can rattling down the road. But I'm thinking with local government reorganisation coming exactly closer and closer, we might get to a situation where the two come together in a rather unpleasant collision. So, I mean, what would happen? Any idea how the local government reorganisation might affect this whole concept of the special needs budget, and what we'd have to do to cope with it if it isn't dealt with? It can't just disappear, sadly.
Still thinking.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty. It's a difficult question. It's a good question. It's a good question, but a difficult one to answer at the same time. I agree. It does feel like it is being kicked down the road again. What we can do as a council, though, is try to manage our position, control what we can control. I think is the main things for us. Make sure, similar to what Councillor Ross was saying in the last one, make sure that we are getting efficiency, effectiveness and value for money from the investment in there. You know, we are talking about children at the end of the day, so what we need to make sure is that we're meeting our statutory obligations, we're investing in the right areas, and we're getting value for money out of the investments we're putting in now. The reform, it'll be interesting to see what the reforms come out with in terms of the white paper that's coming from government. I think it was spring that they said, or summer, or whenever the seasons might align in terms of getting something from them. It'll be interesting to see what that says, and then what the transition period is to go from where we are now into those reforms. Until we see those, it's really difficult to judge the impact on LGR and what that might mean. I think what we do know is, you know, Rutland's numbers are relatively small, although the percentage of the overspend is significantly higher, and we are an outlier in that. So when you look at Leicestershire, for example, and their deficit, it's significantly greater than ours. So there isn't going to be, it's not going to be solved by LGR at all in terms of disposition. So there is going to have to be some form of decisions made on what it looks like going forward in terms of the high needs budget.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that clarification, because I have a horrible feeling that some people think that local government reorganisation will somehow solve this problem, and I don't think it will either. This is going to take government action, but it is worrying because there are children's lives at the end of this. It's not, you know, it's not just an academic process. And frankly, I think it's a really bad way to run anything. Because it's nonsense to, you wouldn't run any, you know, a sweet shop on this basis. You wouldn't be in business long. So, but I'm aware that I keep saying this, and you keep very kindly smiling at me and saying, yes, Councillor, you're right to be worried, which oddly enough doesn't make me feel better, but thank you.
Thank you. Kirsty, would you like to respond to that?
Only to say, and I'll look down to Helen as well, but it's also on the auditors' I say to-do list, but they will too also tell you this is an issue for the council. But just to say as well, there are some indications that we should know more about. I'm not sure it's the override per se, but certainly some further announcements as part of the provisional settlement, which is due the week before Christmas. No idea. There are, we keep up with our networks and the latest rumour, but it changes constantly. How this is going to be dealt with, in an indirect way, the council is borrowing for this. The cash has left our bank account. So what options the national government have got will be interesting to see, but it might not be a big leap. I am surmising this is the opinion of Kirsty rather than official Treasury, but it's being borrowed at the minute, for example. So, but it certainly does need to be addressed, and I understand that the Treasury are aware. So,
I think the great irony is that we're also, was it £500,000 now we could have generated through interest? That for me is the great irony, that we're not able to spend on special needs because of this. Councillor Ross.
Firstly, I welcome this report, and I think it's a bit more Doris Stokes than accountancy in terms of how you actually arrive at a forecast. So I have some sympathy with you. I've just got a few points of clarification, if I may. On page 184, regarding community transport, there's a 10% inflation rate assumed. It's stated in the budget, and yet that's actually classified as red. Could you say a little bit more about why there's such uncertainty around that particular item? Thank you.
We need to remember the timing of this report. So this report was for Q1. So commission transport, it runs on school academic years. So we didn't know, at this time, we didn't know what the new contracts were going to be for the next academic year at the time of writing the Q1 report. So obviously at that point in time, what this was indicating was if we did see a 10% increase, then it could equate to up to £200,000. Now clearly we've had those, I haven't done the Q2 report yet, so I don't know where we are in terms of commission transport at the minute. But what this report was aiming to do was to clarify that there is scope for increases. We know that inflation's been running high. We know that there would have been the national insurance changes from central government at that point in time, as well as fuel inflation as well. So what it was trying to do was to highlight the level of risk there could potentially be in terms of movement on the budget. Our budget assumed, our forecast assumed that the contracts would stay largely as they were. So what we're saying was we could see a significant movement in this area.
Just a couple more, if I may. Law and governance and the underspend there. I was just concerned about that vis-a-vis the demands of local government reorganisation. Have you any thoughts in terms of the demands in that area?
Yeah, so in terms of the risk identified here, there was internal appointments within the directorate that meant timing of where we were in terms of how much that would be and how long they would be was more the reason for the risk. In terms of local government reorganisation and the resource required to do that, we are assessing that as part of the current year budget, and we will put proposals to members as part of that budget.
Last one. On page 187, the scale of the risk reserve, given the post-April 2028 risks, and I don't know if you've yet had any opportunity of any discussions on the basis of this provisioning from discussions that you've had with adjoining councils. It does seem a big figure. Thank you.
Yeah, it's all relative, isn't it? So as I always say, Rutland's risks, we are exposed more as a top tier authority than some of the bigger county councils, for example. So how the cost of care is the same for us and a big county council, but they have more ability to spread that risk. So that's why we tend to carry more in terms of the balances in our balance sheet. This was as you know, part of my role and responsibilities in each budget setting is to assess the level and where we are exposed in terms of risks and what coverage we need. So these balances reflect the budget that we're currently in, so you know, the one that was set in February. So of course, you know, we've still got the send issue looming overhead, and if that has to be funded by the council in some way, then do we have enough coverage for that as well? Alongside, you know, anything that inherent risks of us being a council that we're exposed to and come to fruition, but also, you know, the top one in particular is about our transformation agenda and savings off the back of that as well. So it's all taken us around, and as you know, and you're kindly smiling at me, it is subjective, but you know, that's part of my role of assessing all the risks as we go forward.
Thank you. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the Treasury indicators, the long-term assets to long-term borrowing is red, and as far as I'm aware, Rutland's borrowing has been historical, and I think we've recently paid some of that borrowing off, haven't we? The indicator's red, but is there actually any way that we could improve that indicator, or does our size work against us?
Yeah, it's a real good question. As you've said, we've worked hard to reduce the level of outstanding borrowing that we have been carrying. Equally, as you've said, a majority, if not, I think it is the majority bar one loan was brought forward when we were made unitary as well. One of the issues that I think might be specific to Rutland is a lot of the assets that we carry on our balance sheet are highways and infrastructure related, so assets that don't naturally appreciate. So when you know potentially from your own personal circumstances, when you borrow, say, your mortgages, your house value you're hoping will equally rise. So our balance of our assets and our debt liability is slightly unusual compared to other councils, and it's that infrastructure element that creates that problem. So if we had to realise our assets, for example, to pay off our debt, it creates that ratio difference. But absolutely, as you said, we're paying off the debt as well as we can. So it's to do with the amount of assets and the debt in terms of that ratio. Does that make sense? So the makeup of our assets is what's driving a lot of that.
It makes sense, but it's an indicator that seems to work against us rather than be a true indicator for us, if you understand my meaning.
Yes, in terms of what we can actually do about it, absolutely. Does it give us a slightly weaker balance sheet because of it? We can't realise those assets, so it does create a risk. Yeah.
Councillor Stevenson.
I'm about to demonstrate my background in the arts for the dim question. On page 192, the current assets to current liabilities, because I have an idiot's guide to understanding the two tables, and I did read the text several times. Basically, is that a good thing or a bad thing that I'm looking at? And apologies, committee, for demonstrating my extreme dimness.
No apologies needed, I think, and it is the first time this report's come in, so absolutely, I think all questions are very valid. And just to check, page 192.
And then on to page 193, there are two charts, current ratio for Rutland, and it's with the comparable, the SITFA determined associated councils with North Somerset, Hertfordshire, Gloucestershire, etc.
Absolutely. So this one's looking at the council's current assets, so it can be cash invested, stocks. So where we've got we would call them quite liquid assets, but ones that you could realise into cash. Compared to liabilities, so that might be invoices that we need to pay. So it's the it's almost, I was going to say it's the liquid elements of our balance sheet. As a rule of thumb, you would say a ratio of 1 to 1. So your current liabilities so your current liabilities would match your current assets because of that speed of turning into cash or not. We're high. But we're on a reducing ratio balance, which means this is about maximising that return on our cash. Are we making the most of it? Are we holding too much cash, for example, and the risk around that? So we are a bit of an outlier when you compare us to the SIT for nearest neighbours. And one of the actions that we've been doing is to repay the debt, so to reduce some of that cash balance and make it work harder for us by reducing debt. So it's a trend that is moving in the right direction from where we've been.
And ideally, we want 1 to 1. Thank you very much, and thank you for not making me feel terribly stupid.
Any other questions, members? Councillor Chatfield.
It's not actually a question, but also not having an accountancy background, I have to say, well, I was a bit surprised it's managing financial risks. You said it was the first of its kind. It seems a really important thing to be doing, and I'm happy to say that I understood quite a lot of it. Perhaps not so much to answer any questions, but thank you very much for doing this. It's really, really useful. Thank you.
Yes, Kirsty, if you want to respond, yeah.
Yeah, just thank you for that feedback as well. So whilst it's the first for this committee in particular, it is reported, we did revamp the budgetary control reports that I think you commented in the past in this committee, and that risk, pulling out the risks that are being managed by the organisation was a focus, so it naturally led to this committee as well. The other thing to draw your attention to as well is the council's commitment, and all members have agreed this is financial sustainability being the #1 priority. So in order to get that view on the risks is one, but these financial indicators that you've got here as well is showing you trend over time. So the decisions that were made yesteryear impacting, the position that we find ourselves in now. So hence those trends and the debt levels are coming into it now. So we're creating that overall sustainability package in our finances. So I appreciate all your comments and if there's any areas further that we can work on and include for future reports, really welcome.
Thank you. I've just got one thing that I'd like to add. It's probably the situation with regard to reserves. Obviously, the balances is good. This is all good news. The question I've probably got now, given the next 2 years, we are looking to reduce our debt. We are strong on reserves. What's the fiscal situation with regard to reserves? Obviously, as councillors going forward, budgets to come up, but are we looking to spend a little bit more of those reserves, get rid of a bit more of the debt? What's your position on that, Kirsty?
Yeah, another excellent question tonight. So very much part of the financial strategy that we've been leading on and council have agreed was that reserves strategy. So actually having some broader but known uses for the reserves. So very much reserves to be used to help deliver our financial sustainability. So what investments can we make that actually deliver us those savings in the medium to long term? And I'm hesitating slightly because our risk profile has potentially changed with regards to local government reorganisation. But in terms of these being public funds, they should be used to ultimately help that sustainability position as well. And some of that has got to be investment in prevention type measures as well. So I'd like to think we would still continue to consider those. I will be championing that and advising similar come budget setting, and then that will invest back into our communities and businesses alike as well. So I think that reserve policy holds as an overall strategy, however, appreciating there might be some tweaks that we want to look at.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, members? Okay, then the recommendation is to consider the financial risks identified within the 2025-26 quarter one revenue and capital forecasts. Also to consider the mitigating actions being undertaken to contain the financial risks and whether the committee requires further information on the emerging risks for future meetings. Number 3, to consider the impact of the financial risks as reported at quarter one on the Council's medium-term financial strategy and overall financial sustainability. Could I have a proposer and a seconder to approve the recommendations, please? Wait. Thank you, Councillor Karen Payne, and I'm going to move forward to Councillor Chatfield. We're not going to have the Payne show tonight. Favour?
It's unanimous, Chair. That's carried.
Thank you very much. So onwards and forwards to, as I turn my paper over and get the wrong page. Item number 9, Information Governance Annual Report 2024. To receive the report number 85/2025 from the Strategic Director for Law and Governments. Sarah, I believe you're presenting tonight for the report. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This is the annual report on information governance. So that is the statutory obligations that the Council has to meet regarding the freedom of information requests, environmental information regulation requests, subject access requests and data incidents. The Council has to demonstrate how it complies with those duties. We also have a system Let Us Know for recording complaints, compliments and comments, and the report provides some feedback on that. Chair, members will have read the report, so I don't know if you want me to go over it or if it's best to just move to questions, if there was anything to highlight or...
For me, I've read the report. I'm quite happy to move to questions, members. I trust we've all read it, so it's fairly clear, the report. Thank you, Sarah. So any questions, members? Sarah? Councillor Payne?
I've just got one, Sarah, if I may. FOIs seem to be increasing, and for places seem to receive many more of them than anywhere else, more than double. Do you know if there's a reason for that, if we've looked at the root cause?
So one of the pieces of work that we're doing is around how we better deal with the Freedom of Information Act requests. So absolutely we have a duty to service them, but one of the exemptions is information that is already in the public domain. For the Council, the better approach is to make more information available to everyone than having to spend time servicing requests by individuals. And so absolutely it's we have been advising departments on the sort of the big hitters, if you like, their top 10 or so on what it is, but it's all just that ongoing work. So the website is a valuable tool in that, because going forward we can link to it, and again there's some work that information governance can do around updating its own pages where it links to those sites that are most frequently requested, and to make sure that we're not doing more than we need to, because again it's what's the best service, and that isn't about gold plating, it's about making information accessible, public, clear. So that's ongoing. We have had a reduction, a short-term sort of a recruitment gap, and so we need to be careful to, although the work saves you time, you need resources in order to do that. So I have found that I've been overly ambitious in what we can do while short-staffed, and we've had to put some of that work on hold until we recruit, which will be shortly, we hope. But certainly, yes, reducing the number because it's publicly available is a success in my view.
Thank you.
Any other questions for members? Councillor Stevenson?
Yeah, it's really nice to see everything's very reflective and sort of, right, actually we need to pause that bit, which shows the sort of very in tune working environment. One question was about the FOIs. We're above average, but I guess, are there any sanctions? So 25% aren't met within the time frame. Is there a sort of statutory requirement that thou shalt deal with 90%, or is it just a fact of the matter and it simply compares to averages across the country?
So the statistic is taken from averages across the country, and it's always that risk of being before the Information Commissioner's office if they feel overall we're not dealing with if we're not being open enough. And so we should be dealing with those requests within time. And again, it's about us knowing our own systems, making sure that information is accessible. We're looking at how can we put in place systems, so if you like, when someone submits a request, that generates automatically a search of the website, so that that information is there for them, as opposed to them even having to make that request, because it's not about not dealing with things or turning them down. It's about making it public, so they don't have to wait 20 days for us to process a request, because it's there at their fingertips. That's the better outcome. So yes, it's good data management, openness, and again, that helps us with regard to reducing our risk of any sanction or criticism.
Thank you. Any other questions? Just one for myself then, Sarah. Just on the freedom of information request there, not something I know the first thing about, but SharePoint and onto computers. I noticed you paused it through to some issues. How's that going to go? And hopefully you're going to get it back onto that sort of system, because obviously it's a lot of labour saving and time saving, etc. to do that. Can you just sort of tell us a bit about what's going on with that?
So the way that it was done historically was we would have an email with a table in it, and that would get forwarded to the officers, and they would then fill in the table and send that back. And instead we use SharePoint so that we had a shared document, because quite often what you find is in a single freedom of information request, it's a number of different departments who need to input. So you can all be working on that same document at the same time, but actually then you've got the difficulties of everyone accessing it, and it can get lost, because an email is easier to find than an email giving you access to another folder. So it might be easier to administer in some ways. So we need to, what we've moved to is a more streamlined email, because the table was quite blocky. So we're cutting and pasting our responses, and that's all much simpler. There must be a better way, and certainly Copilot has got some ability to sort of generate standard responses, even if we can. It's not enough to have just an auto response on the inbox, because you want someone to know when they will get their response by. But that sort of thing is easy to do when you invest the time on it. So ultimately, it might be that SharePoint isn't the right vehicle to use. There may be a better way, but we just need some more time and more resources to explore that further.
It's interesting. Again, the introduction of technology to save labour, and I can understand the freedom of information requests particularly, can be time consuming. But I think also, just for everybody's point as well, we should just look to note there that he looks to find it, the compliments as well. I think it's also important for anybody watching. There's an awful lot of compliments that come in, so it's not just the complaints and freedom of information requests. I think we should also acknowledge we get quite a lot of compliments as well. So on that note, if I may, we are just required to note this report, so there is no vote that's required. So we're going to recommend that the committee does note the report indeed. Thank you very much. So, item 10, exclusion of the press and public. The remaining two reports on the agenda do contain exempt appendices. Therefore, we will consider the main report, which will be introduced to the public, and when those appendices are discussed within each report, the meeting will go into exempt session. I will move from the chair for the meeting to go into a closed session for the reasons set out in the agenda. Please may I have a seconder? Councillor Ross? Thank you.
It's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. You had me worried there. I thought I was going to have a constitutional problem going on there. Blimey, don't do that. You'll be sweating, you lot. Right, so then we move on to that, the strategic risk register, which Claire, you are presenting.
Sorry, good evening. So this evening, hopefully, is to give you the story of the implementation of the Strategic Risk Register. Our concept behind it was to make it something that was easier to populate and therefore would become a really useful tool. And in our implementation, we've striven to make sure it's something that's easier to analyse and apply. The consideration there is that we all interpret information differently. And so we have applied our Power BI tool to the Strategic Risk Register, which the hope is to give you a feel for that this evening, because that's how we try to look at it in CLT, and then you'll get a feel for how we do that. So as an outline of the report and the implementation, to see how we're going against our aims as an organisation to embed and adopt strategic risk, I wanted to make it clear in the report that we look at the risk register on a monthly basis at CLT, and quarterly, if not more, at the Directorate's DMT. The risk register is considered, discussed. It's a live document, so it can change all the time, hence the SharePoint link coming to yourselves. Any risks then that need to be in those periods will get escalated to Chair and Vice Chair of this committee. It's very structured, but we feel it helps the implementation, and we have seen that. We've seen a growth in population of the spreadsheet. We've seen a great dynamic when internal audit have assessed on a quarterly basis and pulled out the risk to interrogate.
Yeah, well, I just thought Sarah was
Sir, if you wish to be excused, you're very welcome, please. Apologies, we'll let Claire continue. Thank you, Claire. Sorry, thank you, Sarah. Continue on with Claire.
Thank you. Our developments, since you would have last seen the risk register, are that we are really looking at incorporating this into our bigger process of corporate performance, financial performance, our MTFS and the financial risks, as we've discussed this evening, so that it becomes something that feeds into each other as we go through. So that's the summary, and then I did have the Power BI to give you a feel for that.
Okay, thank you. Just to be informed, we're now going to go into closed session for those that are watching. Okay, so we are back on session, so welcome back, anybody listening. So item 12, the internal audit plan. Oh, sorry, apologies, yes, I'm way ahead of myself, yes. Item 11, strategic risk register, to receive report number 8725 from the director. We've received that. The recommendation is that the committee notes the ongoing work to update the strategic risk register. No vote needed on this one. Sorted. So then we can move forward now to item 12, the internal audit plan, and we are to receive report number 84/2025 from Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So this is your latest update on the delivery of this year's internal audit plan. So it's in the format that you will be familiar with as a committee, but I'll just take you through the key sections. So table 1 on page 231 of the papers, page 3 of the appendix, provides a copy of your internal audit plan for the year and the status of each of those assignments as at the time of producing this report and the outcome of all of those audit reports which have been finalised. So since the last committee meeting, all of the audits that have been finalised have provided opinions of at least moderate assurance. So there are no areas of significant weakness that I needed to highlight to the committee's attention in terms of any limited assurance areas. So those are all set out for you within the table. Also within the report is an update on implementation of audit recommendations and audit management actions. So these are in Appendix B on page 236 of the papers. So we have, since the last meeting, had 21 actions implemented, and we currently have 20 which are overdue. I'm pleased to report that there are no high priority actions which are overdue, which is obviously where our main concern would be. So we will continue to follow up on progress with those outstanding actions on a monthly basis, and that will continue to report back to this committee. Also within the report at Appendix C from page 237 of the pack is our customer satisfaction information. So members of the committee may note that this has changed in terms of format and the type of questions that we now ask. These are now aligned with the new global internal audit standards and our own internal audit strategy. So they're trying to be a little bit more expansive in terms of the areas of coverage. And any responses to date are reflected within those tables for you today as well. So I'm happy to take questions, Chair, on any of the detail within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Members, any questions? Councillor Ross.
Can I ask a question going back? And I apologise, I wasn't at the meeting, but it relates to the highways contracts. And the question is, in your role as internal auditor, are you sharing best practice, for example, in terms of contract performance terms, for example, in your assessment work? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Yes, so we would share examples of good practice, whether that be on a contract management audit or whether that be on any of the audits that we perform. So it's one of the benefits I think you have from having a shared internal audit service with other local authorities. Obviously, our specifics on an individual contract would depend on what's already in the contract as to how they can monitor that and whether there are PIs within their performance indicators that are in there. Obviously, we would not be able to change that at that point, so we can only audit against the contract which is in place. Indeed, we can only audit against the policy in any area or contract that's in place as to how that's being complied with. So where possible, we will share examples of good practice. Obviously, we do have to work to the individual council's contracts and policies.
Any other questions? Councillor Carol Payne.
We have had a cybersecurity vulnerability management audit. Would it be useful to have a representative from IT to come and talk to us, probably under non-disclosure or exempt session for the next meeting, I think, so that we can have some assurance about what's going on in that area?
I was going to mention the same, and I was also going to raise the subject that Councillor Ross had raised with regard to the internal audit on the highways situation. Members, do we feel that we ought to be asking the IT department to come and enlighten us further in December? Would that be possible, Kirsty? Yeah, in that case, yes, I'd agree with that. And I did want to talk about the highways audits, which again is moderate, it's good, it's pleasing. I think, and the reason I asked the question, I'm going to ask the question, is that it's such a lot of feedback that we get from residents throughout the county. And I think we all need to understand the highways issues a lot better. What I picked up from this highways report was particularly with regard to substandard work and how it's been dealt with on an informal basis. And I think that from a council perspective, it comes back. It's not a criticism of highways, but I think we need to understand it more. And I know that myself and Councillor Stevenson had a word. Do you have a view on this, Councillor Stevenson, with your role, whether it's through audit or whether we should look through the scrutiny scenario with it?
Very good question, Chair, and I think it depends what it is that we're seeking. If it sounds as though what we're seeking is, or we're acknowledging that highways maintenance came up a lot, certainly when councillors shared their ward issues, is it a question that we are looking at the data for the assurance, in which case I would say that in the first instance that's coming through audit and risk. I'm looking over at Rachel to see if I have completely understood what I'm talking about. If it's in terms of looking at process, possibly that might be a scrutiny thing, but I would suggest that perhaps we have a chat outside of the meeting, because certainly we wouldn't want it to fall between cracks, and equally we wouldn't want to sort of double do work. But I would say in the first instance it's actually looking at that data and using the audit process to tell us whether we need to be assured, etc., and then take the conversation from there to see if there's a sort of task and finish group or a closed evidence panel session, which perhaps scrutiny could do.
Rachel, do you have a view on that?
Yes, I'd agree. Obviously, it's something to decide as to what you want to get from that exercise, and as you say, whether it's looking at process or what it is you want to achieve from that. So I'm more than happy to be part of any conversations outside of the meeting if that helps to decide which is the best route to go down once we understand what we want to achieve.
Okay, I would suggest then that yourself and myself have a chat outside, and we'll come back, shall we? Okay, thank you. Any other questions, members, with regard to the internal audit? Councillor Ray Payne.
Just to comment, I think what the conversation happening here is reality of the situation, the complexity of these problems, and I think it shows a maturity of government that you're going to have that conversation, because I'm on both committees as well, and I'm sitting there thinking, hang on a minute, which one should we be doing this in? So it's just a reflection of the complexities of the current situation.
Councillor Ross.
I have another general question. As you're aware, the Care Quality Commission is an organisation that's under some considerable scrutiny currently in terms of its performance. And you're also probably aware there was an audit that was carried out of adult social care here. As part of the audit programme that they applied, we went to my colleague on my left, Councillor Ray Payne, and I, ready to answer also questions on the work that had been done by internal audit. But that was deemed to be not relevant to the audit. And I also read the Care Quality Commission's report on University Hospitals Leicester, and they commented on the Audit and Risk Committee and saying that they were spending too much time looking at financial numbers rather than non-financial aspects. So my question is really about the position of your institute vis-à-vis the work that is done by internal audit that will assist the Care Quality Commission's audit process. Thank you.
Rachel, are you able to answer that question? It's not strictly part of the agenda, but I'm happy for you to answer that in the best way you can. I think if we need to continue, I've heard Councillor Ramsey's question, if we need to continue down the line, but are you happy to respond to that?
I'm happy to give a response, and I can obviously go away and give further detail if it's needed. I mean, from our perspective, in terms of my professional body and the standards that I have to work to, our internal audit plan must be risk-based, and it must be based on the council's strategic and key risks. So we need to make sure we have that approach. So if you look at our internal audit plan that's on the agenda today, it's certainly not entirely financial. There's a lot in there around safeguarding risks, a lot around actually a number of key processes within adult social care actually within the audit plan this year, and on a regular basis. So we do need to develop that almost ourselves as to how we get the right level and the right mix of assurances that you need as a committee and that I need to be able to inform my annual internal audit assurance opinion for the year as well, which then informs your annual governance statement. So we wouldn't be able to almost design something around what another body is looking for from our assurances, but we would take into consideration anything that would help to give management the assurances they need. So as an example, we did do an audit in previous years around readiness for a CQC inspection. So that did give management some idea of areas that they needed to develop, any evidence bases that they need to work on in readiness for that. So we would take that into consideration, and hopefully that provides a little bit of a context to your question.
Okay, Councillor Ross. Any other questions, councillors? Okay, thank you very much. So the recommendation is that the committee considers and notes the audit progress report at Appendix A. No vote required, so we can move on. Moving on then to item 13 on the agenda, which is the work plan. To consider the committee's work plan and items for future meetings. David, to present.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so obviously this is a by-meeting basis, so members are aware what's coming up for the future agendas. You can see what's on the in line for the December meeting, with the addition of tonight's agreement to potentially have somebody from IT to come and speak to you regarding cyber security. I'll add that on. And just to let members know that we were successful in gaining an independent member, which will be going through to November full council for approval. So if approved in November, then the first meeting for the independent member will be in December. So that's all gone successfully, and they will be introduced to you at the next meeting, hopefully. So that's just to give you a bit of an update on that also. If there's anything else you wish to be added to the meetings, then please let myself or the chair know, and I can add them.
Thanks, David. Is any items there? I keep looking at, as we all do, and Councillor Ray Payne mentions a lot. I think the timing, local government reorganisation. I'm going to look across to Kirsty here because it's going to be a subject. It's for us. It's going to be a risk, but when is it a risk? We don't know about it at this point in time. I'm very conscious that it will be something that we are going to need to discuss, but I'm less certain about the timings of when that would be most appropriate. So, any thoughts on that from Kirsty or the floor, indeed? Kirsty, it's you.
I've always got a thought. Well, only to concur, I agree with you. I think that there are some, certainly in the forward plan, isn't there, council and cabinet slots to discuss proposals. Government, I believe, won't tell us until the new year, spring. Spring, it's one of those season timescales. But ultimately, I cannot see any reason why that change will not happen. So change comes risk. So I think it makes sense for a future agenda item still.
Councillor Stevenson.
And just to note, it's on the scrutiny agenda for October ahead of the November council. Can't remember the October date off the top of my head. Apologies. My view from the point of view of the audit risk, actually it is around that timing, because actually if everything, the corporate strategy, the MTF, I mean the whole lot, that actually, if you don't know when you are going to have to deliver something or for a significant change to happen, I'm assuming that would possibly be the highest risk, but maybe that is something for the audit committee to think about, our risk ranking of that, and are we comfortable with it?
Yeah, okay. We have the council voting in November. Our next meeting is in December, isn't it? Early December. Do we think we should have something on the agenda, an initial thought process following council for December? Councillor Stevens?
Sorry, I mean, to be honest, you just need to hear back from government. Because at the end of the day, until central government and the powers that be in Whitehall have given us any communication, all we can do is jump through the hoops we've been told to. And actually, I can't see there's any value added until we've heard back from up on high.
Right, Councillor.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Stephen, but it may be a question of that we're going to have to speed up our own processes. So it may be a question that we can't, one meeting, say we're going to do this at the next meeting as we've normally done. It may be a question of everybody be ready to get an email saying we may have to have another meeting next week. It could well come to that, I think.
Okay, Councillor Karen Payne.
Yeah, similarly agree. Until we get something factual back, it's a position, isn't it?
Agreed. Okay, we'll sit on that then. Any other questions or points to raise on the work plan? We'll move on to any other business. I have not been advised of any urgent business, so we will move swiftly on to the date of the next meeting, which is Tuesday the 9th of December 2025 at 7 p.m. We close this meeting at 20:35. Thank you all.